Much Ado About Nothing was written and performed in the Elizabethan era when Queen Elizabeth I ruled England. A significant cultural movement of the day was the Renaissance, which was characterised by a newfound fascination with the ancient world. Lots of writers in Northern Europe, like in England, were inspired by ancient Roman art and literature, and so became fascinated with the birthplace of ancient Rome, Italy. For example, Much Ado About Nothing is inspired by an Italian love story written by Bandello about 100 years before. It gave Shakespeare a lot of ideas, so he appropriated, or borrowed, the setting, lots of the characters, and even the main plot points. Shakespeare saw the potential to make this into a fun play for the English stage. The setting of the play is also drawn from Italy. Much Ado About Nothing takes place in Messina, an Italian city on the island of Sicily. Shakespeare set many of his great romances in foreign locations, which was common for English writers of the Renaissance, who were inspired by the fascinating history of Italy. Besides, England was cold and miserable, so just like Australians who go to Bali, going to an exotic, sunny shore helps us be swept up in the play's romance.
Hey team, just a reminder, if you like this video, please hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It really helps the channel out, and our next upload could be on something taught in your next class. Thanks, and back to the video.
What's more, Messina is a setting of peace and tranquility. Into this peaceful place come soldiers returning from the chaos and disruption of the Italian wars. This contrast between peace and war reflects the contrast between stability and disorder in Shakespeare's time. When Shakespeare wrote this play, Queen Elizabeth was in the midst of a long and stable reign after the period of bloodshed under her sister, nicknamed Bloody Mary. People feared that England would descend into instability again after Elizabeth's death. The ageing queen had no heirs, so there was worry over who would take over the throne. Some people even thought there'd be civil war. That's why Shakespeare often embedded messages in his plays about the peacefulness of stability and the destructiveness of violent chaos. People liked to hear that society was going to stay peaceful. However, Shakespeare's audience didn't just go to the theatre to hear reassuring messages about societal stability. They wanted to be entertained, just like we do when we go to the movies. Much Ado About Nothing is a fantastic comedy full of jokes, misunderstandings, and hilarious situations. Understanding how comedies worked in Shakespeare's time helps us appreciate the amazing humour of the play. One of the most common tropes, or reoccurring themes, of Elizabethan comedy was ending plays with a wedding. Marriages symbolised a return to order, a happy ever after resolution to the comic chaos of the play. Elizabethan comedies were also full of puns or wordplay. Much Ado About Nothing is full of witty wordplay. Even the title of the play is a pun. Considering that ado means a big fuss, on first reading the title sounds like it means a big fuss over nothing. But look closer, the word nothing is nearly the same as noting. In Shakespeare's time, the two words were pronounced almost the same way. Noting can mean noticing, and back in Shakespearean times, it also meant gossip. So if you get the pun of nothing and noting, you'll understand that the title can also mean a big fuss about silly gossip, or a big fuss about noticing things. This hints at all the chaotic misunderstandings and false gossip throughout the play. For example, both Benedick and Beatrice are tricked into falling in love, and Claudio and Don Pedro are tricked into believing Hero is cheating on Claudio. This relates to another common characteristic of Elizabethan comedies, deception. Pretty much every character either deceives someone or is deceived throughout the course of the play. This creates some hilarious situations. Another major trait of Elizabethan comedy is parody. which is where something from life is exaggerated and mocked for comic purposes. For example, Shakespeare parodies courtly love, which is where a young man would fall in love at first sight with a noble woman and then would write ridiculously over-the-top love poetry to her. In fact, lots of people in Shakespeare's day were big fans of the courtly love poetry, popularised by Petrarch, an Italian poet who wrote hundreds of poems about a woman he saw at church once, even though he never actually spoke to her. In Much Ado About Nothing, Claudio is a parody of a Petrarchan lover. He falls in love at first sight with Hero, describing her with flowery, over-the-top language before even meeting her personally. Shakespeare implies that such courtly love can be false and exaggerated, especially as Claudio is willing to dump Hero as soon as he hears a false rumour that she might be cheating on him. Shakespeare also parodies Elizabethan law enforcement in the character of Dogberry, who constantly messes up and trips over his words. For example, he even tells the men of the watch, or guards, that they can go to sleep. Dogberry's character is a great mockery of the police constables of Shakespeare's time, who were from the lowest class and were considered to be bumbling and inefficient in enforcing the law. Some other common tropes or themes that are found in Elizabethan comedy include mistaken identities, eavesdropping, the use of masks, and a good party. These are all key features of Shakespeare's play. Finally, let's look at how gender worked in Shakespeare's time. We will be brief here because you can hear about this more in our lesson on gender in the play. Shakespeare's society was patriarchal, which meant that men had all the power and women were expected to be quiet and subservient. In the play, the men have all the positions of power. Many of them are soldiers, and Leonato has complete control over his daughter Hero. The women, on the other hand, are constantly pressured by the men into behaving appropriately. If women fail to live up to gender expectations, they face great shame. When Hero is suspected of sleeping around before marriage, even her own father doesn't want to talk to her. However, Shakespeare's characters don't all conform to social expectations for their gender. For example, Beatrice speaks her mind, doesn't want to get married, and is very independent. Why do you think Shakespeare has written a character like her, who completely rebels against society's expectations for women? If you think about it, Beatrice is a bit like Queen Elizabeth. She's a woman who can speak her mind, who chooses not to marry, and who's very intelligent. We bet the Queen would have loved watching Beatrice's powerful and witty banter. We hope you enjoyed this Schooling Online production. For more easy lessons on Much Ado About Nothing, check out our explanation of the play's plot summary.